Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. They harassed an old woman without knowing she was an army general. It was an ordinary afternoon in the small town of Davenport, Iowa, one of those days when time seems suspended between the end of summer and the beginning of autumn. The sky, uniformly gray, weighed like a leaden lid on the rooftops. A light mist clung to the sidewalks and bare branches of the trees, and a warm, irregular wind made the dead leaves twirl in a silent dance, like memories of a bygone season. The streets were nearly empty. Only a few residents were hurrying home, heads bowed, shoulders hunched, oblivious to their surroundings. The smell of an old, open garage, a distant cafe, wet tarmac, and damp leaves filled the air. The occasional roar of an old Buick or Ford pickup broke the silence, before everything fell silent again. At the corner of the 4E Avenue N of Jefferson Street, between a dilapidated laundromat and an abandoned fast food restaurant, a discreet figure was slowly advancing. Margaret Louise Thompson, 76 years old. A slim, black woman, her face marked by the years but imbued with serenity. Her short, silver hair, well-groomed despite the humidity, peeked slightly out from under a worn but carefully maintained black wool beret. She wore a long, thick, ash-gray coat, buttoned to her neck. In her right hand, a smooth, dark wooden cane with a rounded knob. In the other, a canvas bag containing a loaf of rye bread, a small jar of honey, and a tin of black tea. She wasn't moving fast, but she was moving straight. Every step was a declaration of dignity. Her spine, straight as a ruler. Her eyes, lowered, but attentive to everything. At first glance, she looked like any other elderly woman you pass by without paying attention. She seemed to make no noise, to take up no space. Almost a ghost among the living. But she was noticed. Leaning against a wall covered in garish graffiti, 3 teenagers loitered, looking aimless. The kind of young people you avoid without even realizing it. Baseball caps on backward, pants too low, shoes worn by miles of bad driving. Their raucous laughter clashed with the surrounding calm. The wall behind them was a chaotic fresco, incomprehensible graffiti, a screaming man's face, a raised fist, a pierced heart. A whole gallery of muffled screams. The leader of the group, Ricky Malone, 19, held an empty soda can, which he crushed and threw back at the wall as if waiting for her to answer him. He was tall, wiry, with a constantly shifting gaze, like a nervous predator. His leather jacket was patched at the elbows, and his smile, always slightly crooked, suggested he enjoyed being a nuisance. To his right, Dante Ruiz, 17, the eldest son of an absent mechanic, had a loud, provocative laugh. A red scarf tied to his belt, and headphones around his neck, though no music was playing. He spoke quickly, often to mask the emptiness of his own thoughts. And finally, Travis Jenkins, 16 years old. Smaller, quieter, but with flashes of rage in his eyes. The type to hit hard when he felt threatened. He was chewing on a toothpick, his jaw clenched, his hands in the pockets of his black hoodie. When they saw Margaret approaching, slowly, without looking at them, Ricky straightened up. He narrowed his eyes, assessing the scene like a game. A smirk slowly stretched across his lips. Look at this, he threw to the other two, a grandmother all alone. What if we went to keep her company? Dante burst out laughing too loudly to be sincere. Maybe she has some candy in her bag. Or better yet, a wallet. They approached, sneering like hyenas sniffing out easy prey. Their steps were not hesitant. They believed themselves invincible. One moved in front of her, another behind, a third to her right. A circle formed, deliberate, threatening. Their aggressive presence cut through the air like a blade. Margaret, still standing straight, stopped in the middle of them. The wind blew a silver lock of hair in front of her eyes, which she pushed back with a slow, almost ceremonial gesture. She finally raised her eyes to Ricky, the leader. His gaze didn't waver. He was supernaturally calm. Cold. Unfathomable. 2 deep lakes in which an unwary man could easily drown. Ricky took another step. He wanted to provoke. He wanted to scare. "Hey Grandma," he said, hands in his pockets, a mocking smile plastered on his face, "you don't seem very fast. You should be careful in this neighborhood." A burst of laughter escaped from the mouth of Dante, who circled around her like a kid around a campfire. "Where is she going like this? Have you forgotten the way to the retirement home?" Margaret didn't answer right away. She looked at each of them briefly, with the precision of a surgeon before making an incision. Her gaze fell on Ricky, sized him up and down. "I don't need your attention." His voice was calm. Not a shout, not a threat. Just Afrozen's certainty, stated with the firmness of a military order. But they did not understand. Or rather, they refused to hear. "Oh, but we insist," Dante sneered, approaching her side. He nudged his shopping bag, which tipped slightly. An apple popped out and rolled gently along the sidewalk, stopping a few meters away. Travis, until then silent, stepped forward and, with the toe of his shoe, pushed Margaret's cane aside with a cruel grin. "Do you want us to help you walk? We could carry you to the hospital, if you really want to." Margaret took a step back, but it wasn't fear or hesitation. It was a repositioning maneuver. Her face betrayed no emotion. She remained upright, anchored to the ground like a bronze statue. Then, very slowly, she spoke. "You have 3 seconds to back out." Suddenly, silence fell. Even the wind seemed to stop. Ricky narrowed his eyes in surprise. Then he burst out laughing, soon followed by the other two. 3 seconds? What are you going to do, Grandma? Hit us with your cane? But then Margaret did something unexpected. She set her bag down on the sidewalk with a calm, controlled, almost ceremonial gesture. The feel of the fabric against the concrete seemed to mark a solemn pause in time. Then, with deliberate slowness, she removed her black beret and carefully slipped it into the inside pocket of her coat. This seemingly simple gesture was a powerful symbol. She was shedding the appearance of the vulnerable old woman to reveal the warrior she had remained. She straightened her shoulders suddenly, instantly. Her posture changed, straightening like a ship's mast in a storm. Her figure, until then frail to the eyes of the adolescents, suddenly imposed itself with the force of a mountain. Her gaze, which had until then been calm and patient, became hard, piercing, unwavering. Then she spoke. His voice, once soft and calm, changed to a clear, deep, and authoritative tone. Each word echoed through the air like the sharp crack of an order given on a battlefield. There was no aggression in his words, but a quiet power, a conviction that crushed all resistance. "My name is Margaret Louise Thompson. Retired Major General, U.S. Army. 35 years of service. 8 international campaigns. 3 presidential decorations. I tolerate neither threats nor contempt. Now step aside." A heavy silence suddenly fell, as heavy as a leaden blanket. The wind stopped blowing, the leaves suspended in flight seemed frozen. Even the distant noise of the city had died away. The 3 teenagers froze. Even the distant noise of the city had died away. The 3 teenagers froze. Their laughter was drowned out by the icy air. Ricky frowned in disbelief, his jaw clenched. "You're talking nonsense. You're just an old lady." His voice was a mixture of disbelief and defiance. He took a step forward, too close, too sure of himself. In a split second, Margaret pivoted with surprising fluidity. Her movements, precise and sharp as a surgeon's, brought her arm around Ricky's wrist and, with a perfectly controlled gesture, she swung him against the graffiti-covered wall. The knife Ricky had surreptitiously taken out slipped from his hand and fell heavily to the floor. She inflicted no wounds, no blows. But he was immobilized, imprisoned by an invisible and implacable force. His eyes widened, helpless. Margaret stared straight into his eyes, slowly, mercilessly. Mistake number 1, underestimating your opponent. Mistake number 2, believing that age weakens experience. Mistake number 3. She emphasized each word, like a hammer striking an anvil. Daring to attack a decorated soldier. Dante and Travis jumped back, their faces ashen, their breaths caught. They looked at each other in terror, realizing that the situation had escalated far beyond their childish play. At the same moment, a trembling voice rose from a neighboring porch. It was Madame Harris, a former local schoolteacher, who had watched the whole scene in silence. With a shaking hand, she pulled out her phone and dialed 911. Sirens wailed in the distance, cut through by the deep roar of engines. 2 patrol cars roared down 4th Avenue, brakes squealing, their lights flashing, casting blue and red streaks across the graffitied walls. The tension in the air was palpable. Passers-by, drawn by the noise, had stopped at a distance, some filming the scene with their phones, others watching in a silence mixed with confusion and respect. 3 officers quickly got out of their vehicles, hands on their seatbelts. They scanned the scene with trained gazes. The image before them was unexpected. An old woman, straight as a soldier, stood a few feet away from 3 frozen teenagers. One of them, Ricky, was still partially immobilized against the wall, his face ashen. At his feet, a small folding knife, thrown there like a useless remnant of arrogance. The younger officer instinctively pulled out his baton, ready to intervene. But another, older one, stopped dead in his tracks. He advanced slowly, his breath slightly short, his gaze changing as he recognized the silhouette of this motionless, dignified woman, with her head held high and her posture impeccable despite her age. His eyes widened with a mixture of surprise, respect, and silent admiration. "Madam, you are indeed General Margaret Thompson?" he asked cautiously, as if he were addressing a heroine from a book. Margaret nodded slowly. "Retired," she said in a calm, collected voice, almost gentle after the storm, "but we never really give up who we are." The policeman took a deep breath. He lowered his head slightly, an almost instinctive gesture of respect. "I read your book at the academy, The War Within. It was required reading for our graduating class. You're a legend. Even our instructor spoke of you as a role model." She barely shrugged, humble. As if the decorations, the honors, the citations in the textbooks weighed nothing compared to the present moment. "I just wanted to buy some bread," she said, nodding her chin at her bag on the floor. These boys had other ideas. The officer slowly approached Ricky, who was still frozen, his wrist red but unharmed. He pushed him back and crouched down to pick up the knife from the ground, wearing gloves. Another officer calmly handcuffed Dante and Travis, who were still in shock. Neither protested. The silence that reigned had become heavy, almost sacred. But as Ricky was escorted to the police car, he turned around. Something inside him, perhaps for the first time in his young life, had been truly broken, or perhaps awakened. His voice was lower. Hesitant. Almost childlike. "But, why didn't you hit us harder? You could have hurt us badly." Margaret looked him straight in the eyes, without contempt, without anger, with an almost maternal gravity. "Because strength is not measured by brutality." She let a short silence hang, as if to make sure the words had sunk in. "She measures herself against control." No one dared to add a word. Even the young policeman, who had kept his hand on his baton, seemed troubled. He looked at Margaret as one might look at a figure from another era, a time when honor, discipline, and restraint were not abstract virtues, but solid foundations. Madame Harris, still on his porch, discreetly wiped a tear from the corner of his eye. A few days later, an amateur video filmed from a second-story window was anonymously posted on social media. It showed a scene both powerful and disturbing: an old woman, upright and imperturbable, subduing a young armed thug without harming him, with the precision of a soldier, and the dignity of a leader. The video was silent, but the images spoke for themselves. In less than 24 hours, the views surpassed 1 million. Shares poured in from all corners of the country, accompanied by astonished comments. "Who is this incredible woman? A real living heroine. This is what it means, true strength is control." Journalists quickly became interested in her past. Former comrades in arms testified. Photos in uniform resurfaced. Military records confirmed, Margaret Louise Thompson had been one of the very first black women to reach the rank of division general in the U.S. Army. A pioneer. A feared strategist. A woman who had led units on 3 continents, under extreme conditions, always respected, often admired, rarely in the media. We bring out his forgotten work, the Inner War, a book about the mental discipline of soldiers, stress management, self-doubt, and ethical leadership. It became an overnight bestseller. Academics, psychologists, and even business coaches began quoting excerpts from it. The city of Davenport, until then known for its quiet markets and old quarters, suddenly became the center of a national tribute. The mayor organized a public ceremony in the central square. An impressive crowd gathered. Flags were raised. A local choir sang the national anthem. Margaret, dressed in a simple navy suit, slowly walked onto the stage. She saluted the crowd with a precise, military gesture. Her gaze was serious but gentle. He was given a Civilian Medal of Honor, a rare distinction. The veterans rose one by one to salute her, their fists on their hearts. Children from the local school recited her story, while several young black girls held signs reading, "Thank you, General Thompson. Thanks to you, I know it's possible." And yet, despite the recognition, despite the emotion, Margaret declined interviews. She avoided TV appearances, invitations to Washington, publishing contracts. When a journalist pressed her, she replied with a discreet smile, "I didn't do this to become famous again. I did what I had to do." As always. The truth was, she sensed something else coming. A quiet, more intimate mission. Since the incident, several young people from the neighborhood had tried to approach her. Some, like Travis, had asked to speak to him. Others, like Ricky, had written clumsy but sincere letters of apology. Margaret understood then that her mission in this world was not yet complete. After years of military service, of battles fought on both visible and quieter fronts, she realized that the real battlefield was now right there, in the heart of her own community. And it was in the modest basement of the Davenport Baptist Church, among the worn wooden pews and walls covered with children's paintings, that she decided to take up arms again, no longer to fight, but to uplift. She launched weekly workshops. The sign on the door simply read, "Discipline, Courage, Respect, by General M. Thompson, Ret. Free admission." For the first few days, few dared to cross the threshold. But those who did came away deeply moved. Margaret never shouted at them. She didn't give orders like she once did on a parade ground. She spoke in a low, firm, calm voice. And above all, she listened. Truly. Single mothers, lost teenagers, ex-offenders, they all found in her a quiet strength, a beacon in their inner darkness. She taught them the art of silence. Respect for one's word. The importance of posture. "An upright man begins by standing upright," she repeated. Little by little, in this neighborhood often abandoned by institutions, Margaret Thompson became a pillar. Not a celebrity. Not a media heroine. But a presence. An invisible column on which others could lean without fear of falling. And then there was Ricky, Dante, and Travis. After their arraignment, a liberal judge, moved by the viral story and impressed by Margaret's calm handling of the situation, proposed an alternative to incarceration, a civic rehabilitation program. The 3 teenagers were sent to a special center, run by none other than Margaret herself. The first morning, before the sun had risen, she led them out in silence. No shouting. No insults. She handed them running shoes, a plain gray t-shirt, and led them to a deserted road on the edge of town. Walk. 6 kilometers. Without a word. "I'll walk ahead." At first, they grumbled. Ricky limped slightly. Travis dragged his feet. But as the minutes dragged on and the sweat flowed, something changed. At the end of the march, as the sky began to redden, Margaret stopped. She turned slowly toward them. Her gaze, piercing, held neither anger nor contempt. Just demand. What you did was cowardly, she said. But that doesn't mean you're lost. The three young people looked down. This country needs strong young people. Upright. Just. Not boys who wait for the night to become shadows. It needs builders. Watchmen. I will teach you how to walk again. How to stand. How to become what you should always have been. They didn't dare contradict her. Not this time. Something inside them, imperceptibly, had shifted. The following days were tough. Waking up at dawn. Cleaning common areas. Silent meditation. Reading texts about Mandela, Audie Murphy, Harriet Tubman. Margaret didn't lecture them. She gave them missions. Responsibilities. And sometimes, in rare moments of grace, she told them about her past. How, as a young black recruit in an army still hesitant to see women in command, she had stood her ground. How she had commanded a mixed unit in the Gulf and refused to bow to racist injunctions. How she had been wounded once, not by a bullet, but by the look of a soldier she had saved, who refused to salute her. One morning, as Travis sweatily finished a set of push-ups, he dared to ask him a question. Why are you doing this? For us? After everything we've done to you. She stared at him for a long time. Because no one reached out to me at your age. And because you're worth more than you think. Margaret Thompson was not just a former general. She had become, for these young people and for so many others, a guardian. An educator. A sentinel of honor. That day, on a forgotten street in America, she had not only disarmed 3 teenagers. She had defused time bombs. She had shown them that one can be strong without being violent. Proud without being arrogant. And above all, she had taught them a lesson that would remain engraved forever. Dignity doesn't shout. It asserts itself. It walks straight. And it changes the world, one step at a time.